Although British Columbia ranks near the top of the world in evaluations of K-12 education, each year the role and quality of our public schools reemerges as a key issue. We witness a highly publicized debate where schools, teachers, students, and politicians are seen as competing against one another for top marks in the name of accountability. This conflict raises questions about the pace of learning, the place of public and private education and their funding, and whether economic and quantitative criteria accurately represent schools and describe their quality. On today's program, Michael Zlotnik, President of the Charter for Public Education Network, and Charles Bingham, Associate Professor of Education at SFU, join me in a discussion that delves deeper into these issues. I'm Paul Shaker, and this is An Education Matter. Michael and Charles, thank you for being with me today. I wanted to start our discussion by talking about the big picture with public schools, because I think this sometimes gets forgotten and we become obsessed with smaller things without ever establishing the ground we're really in. So let's talk about what the real purpose of education is, and I wanted to start with Michael because of your relationship with the Charter. What have you found through your work with the Charter? And describe the Charter process to us, please, as to how it was determined what British Columbians think the purpose of education is.
So the Charter began with 4 citizens taking time out from their work, and they represented education, the community, parents, the Aboriginal community, and going around the province and hearing from the citizens, the teachers, and the students, the parents, what do they want in the way of education? And they focused on the positive vision, not all the complaints and concerns that people had, but what was the vision that they had, what were the purposes and the aims and the principles and the promises of public education. And they produced this charter, which is up in school districts and universities and so on around the province.
And how long did this process go on?
It went on for around 9 months, and then it resulted in a report, and then the report was a long report, in fact, and this is a summary of the long report that looked at all these issues. And it was widely supported, not only in British Columbia, but in other countries, was translated into different languages and so forth, and there's been great enthusiasm for this.
So it's seen as a leading effort around the world to really get back to the public's view of education. What were some of the things that you found specifically then that the public does want from its public schools?
They want a broad education. They want to cover the arts, the sciences, mathematics, history, music, the whole thing. And they want students to have an active role in their own learning. This is a crucial point. It is not, we want students to have the legacy of the best that the cultures of the world can offer them, but we also want them to have an active role in their own learning. And we want, there's always something new to be brought forth. And you know, it's not just the wisdom of the elders, but it's the openness and possibility and hope in young people. And we want to bring that forth.
Now, Charles, you're a student and a scholar in these areas. What does this resonate for you? How does this resonate for you as you think about what you've studied as the purposes of education?
Well, certainly educational theory, especially progressive educational theory, teaches us the importance of active learning. So John Dewey, a century ago, stressed the importance of connecting knowledge to students' experience, and that's active learning. And this has been a prevalent way of thinking about education in BC for close to 100 years.
So the active aspect, how about the breadth of learning that Michael was talking about?
As well, educational theory talks to us directly about breadth. Liberal educational theory talks to us about the fact that the school is a place that introduces the student to a wider range of experiences than the home. So the school is sort of a way station between the home and public sphere. We go to school in part to get away from family and to learn about other people's experiences, experiences of people whose language we may not share, whose culture we may not share, whose religion we may not share. And this is a very important role of school in terms of offering breadth to students' experience.
Well, it's become fashionable to describe schools primarily from an economic point of view, that they prepare workers and guarantee future prosperity. Are you saying that there's more to school than that?
That's one important dimension. The educated citizen should learn how to contribute to the goods and services and well-being of the whole community. But that citizen should also grow, and the Charter says, in fact, that as a community, we promise to prepare learners for a socially responsible life in a free and democratic society, to participate in a world which each generation will shape and build. And what that means is that the children are not going forth simply to fit into the world as it is, but they're there to make the world a better place. And so we need to educate them for all, not only to serve, which they should do, but also to shape the world that they're going to be in.
Well, some of those things sound like they are not knowledge that we think of as factual knowledge. They're knowledge having to do with values or behavior, or human qualities. Would you say that's a part of this?
I would say that most citizens in British Columbia want their children and want their neighbors' children to grow up to be wise, ethical, and responsible. And that is more than a matter of factual, of information and facts. Information and facts are important. Equally, if not more important, is the ability to think soundly and to act responsibly.
How about from your point of view, Charles? Do we stray a great distance from the simple curriculum of facts and data to get at the sort of objectives that Michael was talking about?
Can you say more?
Is this a different kind of learning than the kind of learning that many people associate with school? You learn your multiplication tables, you learn how to spell, you learn grammar. These qualities he's talking about, how do you really teach those? That's not factual knowledge, that's something else.
These qualities that Michael's talking about and that I very much respect are not always factual knowledge. They're about how we interact with the world. Once again, I'll describe this transition from the private sphere, from the home, to the public sphere. Right? The school is a way point. Right? It's a way station. When I go to school, I learn that the teacher helps me to interact, to play well with other children, to understand other children who are not exactly like me. And those are intangible. Those are not the same as reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's what teachers endeavor to do on a day-to-day basis. It's very important.
So it sounds to me like the culture of the school and the interpersonal relations of the school are key in the sorts of things you're talking about, the character of the teacher, the quality of the interaction between the teacher and the students, all these interpersonal things that we associate with relationships.
And they're not separate from learning to read and write and understand science and history and music and art. They weave in.
Would you say that this dimension of schooling that you're describing contributes to motivation in students? Does it have a role to play in motivating the students to want to learn the fact-based or data-driven aspect of the curriculum?
Absolutely. If schools were just about facts and data, then schools as we know them could disappear. All right? When the television came out, people proclaimed that the television would replace schools and teachers. When the computer came out, people said, oh, there's no need for teachers anymore. People can teach themselves on the web. Well, guess what? Students can teach themselves, but it doesn't happen very easily. So we need teachers who are there to motivate students. It's not hard to go to the library and pick up a book on mathematics. One can teach oneself to do mathematics, but it doesn't happen. Why? Because we need teachers who have a broader set of skills to motivate students.
So we see these relationships contributing to the life of the curriculum in the school, and the interactions of the teachers lead the students to be engaged with the more fact-driven aspects of the curriculum. This is what I hear you saying.
Well, it's just really important that we learn to become responsible in a mature way. If I had to sum up this question of the purpose, we help children to grow up to become wise, ethical, and responsible. And to become responsible is a long-term life process. And it is not enough to simply have a whole body of facts.
Would you say that things like sports, student government, and extracurricular activities, science fairs, and these sorts of things which are not a part of necessarily what's examined are contributing also to this aspect of school life?
These are as important, if not more important, than reading, writing, and arithmetic. They help to motivate students, and they are goods in themselves. Most of us, when we think about schools, we think about those times that we flourished, say, on a sporting team, right? Or in band, or in shop, which is not reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those.
And are you saying, Charles, that this is a change from the way schools were before progressivism? That schools were more the 3 R's and rote learning, and that a change has occurred in the past century or so to give more significant value to these other dimensions of the school experience?
I think that progressivism heralded in a movement towards connecting knowledge with experience. Okay, so we realize now that we aren't thinking machines. That we need to connect what we learn with what we do in a broader spectrum of how life unfolds.
So the interpersonal and emotional climate, the relationships that exist within the school are all vital to having a quality school. And the dimensions of the school are not just economic, but include things like citizenship and even self-realization or fulfillment of the individual personality. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, and if I can say, literacy is incredibly important. But it's more than a simple decoding of words on a page. It's a whole critical literacy. It's to understand the ideals of cultures, and it's to understand your own ideals, and it's to be able to converse with people and make sense of the world and to share your sense of the world. So it's not a case of setting aside literacy or anything of that sort, but of including it in this whole development of a well-rounded citizen and person.
Thank you very much. We'll be back to this discussion in a few moments.
For more than 40 years, the Faculty of Education at SFU has been delivering academic programs that are innovative and responsive. Based on the academic research of our professors and the expertise of practicing teachers from your communities, our programs are designed to meet classroom needs. As a community, we're piecing together a successful education experience for students today and in the future.
Our topic today are the goals and purposes of public education in Canada. Michael, we wanted to talk a little bit about the market thinking that has been introduced into the relationship between the public and its schools. I understand that this was part of the motivation for the charter being conceived. Could you reflect a little with us on this notion of markets and how they should function with relation to our public schools?
Well, public education is not a market commodity. Public education is to prepare young people for the whole spectrum of their life, only part of which is to participate in a market. And so if we were to reduce the measures for the quality of education to simply readily measurable items, and in terms of an economic contribution to the society, that would be too narrow.
So does this fit with the objections that many have raised, including 85% of our teachers, to the FSA testing, which is used in order to rank schools and treat them as if there were a marketplace of schools, and one could determine the best school for one's child by looking at rankings of the 1,000 elementary schools in Canada, or excuse me, in British Columbia?
Yes, and It's taking a very narrow slice of learning and treating it as if it's a valid indicator for the whole. The Charter for Public Education Network has discussed this, and we believe that the foundation skills assessment is a mistake right now.
Charles, looking at it now from a position of an academic person, what do you see as the essence of this debate that's going on in British Columbia about school rankings?
Well, I think, as you said, that school rankings is often based on a market understanding. Let the schools compete. Let us see which ones are high and which ones are low. To me, to say that schools should act as a marketplace is a bit of magical thinking, because the school is not the same as the firm. When we think about markets and we think about firms, we think about how a firm can become more lean and mean in order to compete with other firms, how it can use less resources and less personnel and less space, less time in order to compete well. A school is something completely different than that. To say that a school should become lean and mean in order to compete is never going to work. School needs more personnel, more resources, more time, more space in order to serve our students well. So that it's like comparing apples to oranges, and I call that magical thinking.
Okay, but there are people who believe that by administering a test like the FSA, we get a kind of a sample of life in a school, and then it's appropriate to take that sample and generalize from it as to the quality of that school. Again, why isn't that line of thinking appropriate in the minds of your organization?
Well, for one thing, one of the notions behind that is choice. And so we will rank the schools, and then we can send our children to schools that are high performing. Really, what we believe is that we should have good community schools, and that the choice should be for the parents and the children and the citizens in that neighborhood to decide the nature of the schooling that they want to have. And so rather than assessing on some numbers determined by faraway authorities, we have the people in the community determining what are the criteria of a good school and working together to accomplish that.
Charles, what do you have to say to that argument that this is an appropriate way to take a sampling of quality in the life of a school and to generalize from it about the quality of that school and its teachers?
It depends what's done with the information. If the aim of that information is to assault our private schools by claiming that they're not doing a good job, then that is not an appropriate use of such information. And that is happening in the country of our neighbors to the south, where in large urban settings, schools are being closed because they're not performing well. Right? Now that's market thinking, that when you have a firm that doesn't perform well, that it should be closed in order to streamline the market as a whole. I don't think that we should treat our schools like that.
Do you think there are unintended consequences that result from, some people who believe in the rankings say at worst they're harmless. If you don't believe that they're valuable, you can ignore them, but they don't do any harm. Do you think there are unintended consequences of the ranking movement that are harmful?
In an overall sense of the focus on testing and accountability for getting test scores up, there are terrible consequences. What you do is you distort the aims of education. It becomes a matter of getting your scores up. If that means eliminating some kids from writing the tests, of talking some children not to take biology, for example, because they might lower the score, or focusing only on those things that will get the score up, rather than developing what we call that all-around development of the individual. If it means avoiding issues and concerns that are part of the education of a citizen that are not readily measurable, yes, all of those things are destructive to the quality of education.
Do you see any other unintended or negative consequences from the ranking and testing movement?
No, I concur with Michael. The main negative consequence is that there's too much focus on the tests themselves. So teachers spend a week or two teaching children not about mathematics, but about how this test will ask them the specific question on mathematics that it has tended to ask them other children in the years prior.
How about the breadth you were talking about before of all the non-fact and information aspects of the curriculum that aren't on these tests? The student council, the sports, the leadership, the citizenship, the moral culture, the aesthetic part of the curriculum. Does having a single indicator system for accountability affect the curriculum, the breadth of the curriculum?
Absolutely. Teachers will tell you that they are not able to spend as much time on aspects of the curriculum as they did before because it's not going to be tested. It won't have the same weight in the evaluation. And this is especially true with examinations that have direct consequences for students.
And Charles?
Well, let's say I'm an elementary school teacher and it's my job to teach physical education as well as mathematics. In a few weeks prior to the test, I may deem it necessary or may feel pressure from school district or school administrators to teach less physical education and teach more mathematics in order to get them ready for the test. That's detrimental.
Can't we count on our school personnel not to succumb to these sorts of temptations and to keep to the high standards of their profession and to keep to the curriculum that they believe in and not to try to tip the scales by slanting things in favor of what's measured?
That's why so many of them are resisting the foundation skills assessment.
Okay. Are there any other aspects of our public life that are evaluated in such a manner, that, to your knowledge? Is this a widely used model in other areas of public or civic life to find an indicator such as this and then to rank institutions?
Well, I think as you indicated, I think that sports teams, and this is something we do with sports teams, yeah.
The superintendent of schools in Nebraska, who was spokesperson for different sorts of evaluations, said that test scores are indicators, not outputs. That was central to his argument in how they were distorting school life. Does that claim resonate for you at all? What would that mean? Why would you call them indicators and not outputs, and what's the difference?
If I can speak from an example, when I was 16, I took a driver's test, and I scored 98% on that driver's test. Within the subsequent 3 months, I was in 3 car accidents, and I actually totaled 3 cars. That driver's test had nothing to do with what I would call being educated as a driver. It takes years and it takes time to become educated, and little snippets are not going to indicate the extent of one's education.
So how about the fact that the tests promote competition in our school system? That's part of the market thinking. Don't you favor a way of culturing competition between schools and between the private and public sectors in education?
No.
Well, why wouldn't you favor competition? It's the central dimension of the market.
Because we're trying to develop educated citizens who serve the whole community. And so what I want is all children to achieve a high quality of education, to become responsible. And that is a benefit to the whole community. You know, I'm all in favor of sports competitions and things of that sort. That's fine, but not a competition that tries to lower, if you like, the relative achievement of other children or other schools or other communities.
Thank you, Charles.
Unfortunately, competition ultimately leads to selectivity. Public schools are not to be selective. However, when you have competition, ultimately the only way to really gain an advantage is to select who comes in your door. That's the reason that private schools come out on top perennially of the rankings. It's because they can be selective. They don't need to take some schools.
Okay. Thank you, Michael and Charles. We'll be back in a moment. Education is a sacred trust. In a specific way, this institution and its professional staff are entrusted with our children and the future of our society. Over the past decade, our public schools have become subject to political interference and media attack that violate the gravity and uniqueness of this mission. Our schools deserve better treatment than to be carelessly arrayed like sports teams in newspaper tables. Our professional licensed teachers are trusted partners with parents and other citizens in the nurturance of our youth. They are not caricatures to be disrespected and ground in the mill of politics and media hype. The people of British Columbia have affirmed their confidence in public education through their response to the 2005 Job Action and the Charter for Public Education movement. The people have asserted that what polls have shown. Teachers and our public schools are among our most trusted professions and institutions. When forced to choose, we trust our teachers. Thank you for watching Your Education Matters.
For more information about this show or to view past episodes, go to the Your Education Matters website at www.youreducationmatters.ca. The views and opinions presented in this program are not necessarily those of all faculties, staff, or administration at SFU.